Warning. This podcast contains true stories that are not intended for those missing a sense of humor. Any resemblance to actual events or allegations are purely coincidental. Before listening, please relieve yourself, as possible adverse effects include spontaneous bladder leakage, mild hysteria, and sudden release of dopamine. Names have been changed to protect the innocent and guilty. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, Karen. Welcome to Coding Consultant Confessions with Tony Elholmes, Stacy Buck, and Victoria Mole. Unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic. In this podcast, Tony, Stacy, and Victoria come together to share unique perspectives, engaging dialogue, entertaining commentary, and funny stories for those working in the healthcare industry. And now, here are your hosts, Tony, Stacy, and Victoria.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to a brand new episode of Coding Consultant Confessions. I'm your host, Tony Elholmes, and I'm joined by my friends and amazing co-hosts, Stacy Buck and Victoria Mole. I want to say thank you to all of our supporters and all of our listeners. We really appreciate you tuning in every other Wednesday. So today's topic is all about business travel gone wild. So we're going to be sharing some of our thoughts and experiences with professional business travel, some of the craziest experiences we've encountered. I've certainly have a lot of stories I could share. We're going to be giving you some travel tips from the pros, some things that you definitely want to keep in mind if you are starting your journey and you're going to be doing more travel professionally, or if you're a vet and you'd like some tips to put in your arsenal, we're going to give you lots to digest. So we're also going to be talking a bit about how business travel looks quite a bit different now than it did, let's say, 15 years ago, and specifically how things have changed with the COVID era or the post-COVID era. So let's dive right in. Victoria, let's start with you. So tell us about your thoughts on business travel, how things have changed, and what you think.
Yeah, it's interesting to see some of the changes that we've had with travel. I mean, it's definitely been pared down, but it's been difficult lately, just even traveling in general, because of some of the airline restrictions. A lot more people are wanting to go via car because they don't want to have to deal with airline cancellations. I recently, just on a leisurely trip, had a delay where I was delayed a day because there was just a storm coming in where I was landing and we couldn't land, and it threw a lot of stuff off. So there's definitely a lot more structural changes that you have to make as far as disaster planning when you're traveling anywhere anymore. As far as business travel, we've really seen a lot of virtual education sessions coming up now, that people are getting that same education that they need without having to do the travel. And people aren't as apt anymore to want to spend the hotel fees, to want to spend the airfare, to want to spend the gas money, to want to spend the time away from their families, when they can sit at home, get the same quality education, and not have to invest those costs. And of course, we still see a lot of people who want to, because they're social butterflies. They love the networking opportunities. They want to, meet their industry friends. They want to network. They want to have, the cool pictures that go on their LinkedIn, because it looks a lot cooler if you're standing with someone in person versus a screenshot of a, Zoom meeting. And it's fascinating to see how some industries have still continued to do so well, and then some others not so well. One of my friends was recently out in Vegas. She works in the tech industry, And her conference, she was like, oh, well, we had this really great motivational speaker. They used to be in some sort of sports athlete. I don't know. I don't know anything about sports and athletes and what all the names of the different players are and retirees and who does public speaking. But I'm like, wow, that sounds like she had a much better public speaker than we have. It's, I think, some of the conferences that we have in our industry, our keynotes, some of them I've not felt to be quite up to snuff. And I wish we would see more in our industry some of the aspects of things that we see in other conferences. And I think that might drive people to want to travel more. Even I like to take a lot of inspiration from things that go on in like the video game industry. And, I like to go to comic book conventions. So when I go to a comic book convention and I see, wow, there's like people there I can meet and I can take photos with and get autographs. And there's, interactive things that I can take photographs with, and then go to an industry conference. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we're going to have, karaoke, or we're going to have, a dance at night, or we're going to have a little meet and greet dinner. It's like, wow, these are two wholly different entities right here, where one, while I get it's more of an entertainment thing and we're trying to keep professional in the other, like there's a lot of elements that we could maybe pull over and try to make things more engaging. I remember back in the day, we used to have AAPC Dave, and at our Vegas conferences, he would come dressed up as Elvis. And at the Disney conferences, he would dress up like Gaston, and they would do trivia and they would pull people up on stage. And since he left, like I haven't seen anything replace that. And those are elements that I really miss. Like if I saw more engaging entertainment, things that I had that like it triggered that FOMO in you, right? That fear of missing out. You're like, oh, there's this cool thing going on at conference and I don't want to miss it. I would probably be more apt to invest the money in the travel and things because who doesn't like to take those photos on Instagram to go like, look at the cool thing that I did over at conference. Like that is, I think, what's driving more people these days is that fear of missing out, and kind of feeding into that and wanting to feel like, if I don't go in person, I'm going to miss out on these aspects of the conference. There has to be something more that's going to drive you above and beyond like just getting the education, because you can do the education part in the virtual setting.
Yeah, I think that's so true, how that's changed and how now FOMO is kind of the driving force behind conference registrations versus like marketing efforts, and how social media has changed that game. It's pretty crazy. So you're headed to a conference soon.
I am. I've been very nervous because, I've not gone a lot of places because of COVID in the past 2 years, like professional wise. I run my own business. I work from home, so I'm mostly in sweatpants. And now they're like, oh, well, since you're on the board, we have a dress code. You have to wear khakis and you have to wear slacks. And I'm like, I mean, let me check my closet. I haven't worn khakis in like 20 years. So those I'm going to have to go out and get. And shoes, like, because I have all kinds of foot problems. I usually wear my Hokas, and that's what I live in. Like I live in sweatpants. I'm either in sweatpants or gym clothes. Like that's it. So I actually had to go out and get some shopping done to make sure that I have appropriate professional attire to wear to conference.
That's funny. Stacy, you just came back from a conference last week.
I just came back from the Florida Health Information Management Association annual meeting. And it's funny, like Victoria mentions like the dress code and like how the board members wear like matching like outfits. So people who know me know I am not a fan of like the matching like outfits. And they've tried to do this here and there with FHIMA like over the years that I've been on the board, and I'm always the rebel that just won't do it. And it was funny, this actually came up at our last board meeting last week about, wearing the shirts or the sweaters. And I said, I will never do that. I will not. I went on record and just flat out said it. And I said, now, I go, I'm not a fan of dressing alike. I said, however, if you all would like to dress like me, then we can have that conversation and we can do matching outfits. And they're like, yeah, we don't quite know if we could pull that off. So, so that was like interesting. I still wouldn't like that. I wouldn't want little clones of me. But, at least I could maybe get on board with that for a day if I could, pick out the outfits and the shoes and the accessories and like all of that. But it was great to be at an in-person, conference. One thing, I prefer in-person meetings over virtual any day of the week. I go to conferences. For me, it's more social than educational. I only attended one session at FHIMA, and that was the keynote session. Other than that, I was networking and socializing for all of the days that I was there and showing off my shoes. My shoes are the star of convention every year, and people check in with me. What are you wearing today? What do you have on this morning? What do you have on this afternoon, this evening? So that's always kind of a fun thing to do. But I like the fact that I feel like one thing positive that came out of COVID and having to do everything remotely and not traveling is I got to speak to so many groups that I never would have otherwise had the opportunity to speak to. I got to do a lot of other state HIM associations. I got to speak to a lot of local AAPC chapters. So that was kind of nice. So I'm glad to see that those opportunities are still there for those people that are doing virtual, because honestly, I'm not a fan of travel. And a lot of people find that shocking. I avoid travel. I avoid business travel. And I hate flying, and even personal travel. When I go on vacation, I vacation in Florida. I can drive anywhere in Florida. And I'm like, why do I need to leave here? It's the best place in the country, anyway, I don't need to go anywhere else. So flying is just not my cup of tea. It's never been. So I was okay with the fact that business travel was kind of shut down, and I don't travel near as much as I used to. I used to travel a lot for speaking engagements and conferences. And again, because so much is virtual, that's not needed anymore. And I only ever had one job that was mostly all travel, almost every week. And that lasted 7 or 8 months. And I'm like, this is just not for me. And, I know there are some stories that we're going to share about some of our fun or funny business trips that we all have taken.
Yes, we're gonna be sharing some travel crazies. Just some thoughts about business travel. So it's something that I think a lot of people in their mind, outside of going to a conference or a work sponsored event, when I used to travel a lot more, people would think that it was this glamorous thing, and they would be jealous and almost wow, you're so lucky you get to get on a plane and go and sleep in a hotel and eat great food. And it's man, it is not glamorous. It is way more romanticized than it actually is. And so, when I worked in corporate, I was on a plane, in a car, for years. That was my life. And, obviously this was mostly before I had kids. I mean, it was rough. There were times when I'd get stuck in airports because of layovers, or I'd have to stay in this podunk, rinky-dink, nasty hotel that's the only hotel available, and there's no other hotel for 300 miles. So you're stuck with what you got.
Yeah, and you're eating gas station hot dogs because there's nothing else available.
Yeah, you're getting lunch at the Loaf and Jug. That's the reality of it. You're not mucking it up in some 5-star hotel, which, that happens too. I've had instances where I'm a conference speaker and they put you up in these really nice hotels like the Ritz-Carlton or, the Four Seasons. And that's really nice, where you can order room service and have everything, delivered to your room. And you kind of feel like a celebrity, but that's the exception, not the norm. That's not what happens all the time. So, the most amount of travel that I did was during ICD-10, because I was traveling all over the country to help providers and hospital systems get ready for this transition. It was massive. It was the equivalent of Y2K in the industry. I know you guys remember. It was just it was so crazy. And the places that I went, wow, there would be populations of 110, 110 people in the whole town. And you could just imagine what the hotel looked like and what some of these facilities look like. So that was a very interesting experience. I'll share obviously some stories about that. And then I've done a lot of work in rural health. So where you go to these rural health clinics and federally qualified health centers that are kind of in the middle of nowhere, and they're safety nets for the community. So that has been very, very interesting. And then with COVID, things have changed significantly. I've done obviously a lot more virtual conference speaking. The first conference that I actually went to in person since COVID was back in December. I went to the NAMUS conference, and that was a blast. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. They really know how to throw an incredible event. I got to meet, Shannon DeConda and Sean Weiss and, Jordan Johnson and Eric Rubenstein. And I got to see all of them in person. And that was just like, it was so much fun. Sanal Patel, Pam Vanderbilt, like we were all together in this, this place, and we just had the best time and, shared the best stories, and nothing can replace that. Like once you have that kind of experience, it's like you crave it. You want to have that again and again and again. And so I'm hopeful that, with everything that's happening in the world, we're going to have more of the in person, because that is just so much better than Zoom. And then just a final thought. So, before the pandemic, there was like no such thing as Zoom court. So now I do Zoom court all the time where I testify virtually, which is so cool. It's like the best thing ever, because, I don't have to like get into these, pants that I don't really want to be in and wear a suit. And, you still have to look professional, but, from what people can see. So wearing the comfy clothes and, doing that is something that I think everybody's become accustomed to in the pandemic. So I feel for you, Victoria. You're going to have, all those days where you really have to wear uncomfy clothes and be on, right, in a different way.
Yeah, and it's tough. Thankfully, like I still, and I'll be very honest about this. I've been working very hard since December to get back to my pre-pandemic weight, because much like a lot of people, I was sitting at home and I was snacking because I'm bored and I got nothing else to do, and I still have like 20 pounds to lose to get back to my pre-pandemic weight. So I'm glad that my old pants still fit, because you know how hard it is as a woman to find pants that have freaking pockets in them and that fit appropriately at the waist and at your ankles. Like it's a nightmare pants shopping, which is why, since all of my YouTube videos, I'm just from like the chest up, so I'm wearing sweatpants in pretty much everything. And if I'm not wearing sweatpants, like I said, I'm in my gym clothes because I'm going to work out or something. But yeah, I feel for you, Tony, when you mentioned about ICD-10 and working with rural health clinics. That actually took me back, because when ICD-10 hit, I was working in Lancaster. So some of the practices that I was working with were in like the Amish community and the rural Amish community. So I was working like driving through tiny little crazy farmlands, just navigating through Google Maps to get to these places. And, there was people pulling up in their horse and buggies to come in and go to the clinic. And yeah, it was fascinating. But it was also different because it was not only the Amish population, but Lancaster City is a bustling city. It's a very, like any modern city. So it was a very stark contrast of that, and then also the city practices, like in the inner city, Duke Street, and also we had at one point taken on a practice that was in one of the local colleges. So it was the local college's like infirmary that we had taken over. So it was Amish people, it was the inner city, and then it was college kids. And I was so naive at the time when I started working there. I'm like, wow, how is it that every college student that's coming in here seem to have all forgotten their Adderall? What the hell is going on? Because I didn't realize, someone had to explain to me. They're like, oh, they don't really have ADHD. They just use that because they need to study a lot for their college programs. So they just go in and pretend that they forgot it so that they can get this and get all hyped up and then stay awake all night to do their college studies. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That is wild. Yeah, I want to hear some more of your crazy stories. Wow.
Well, we have lots of podcasts coming, so we can go through them as we go through.
Yeah. So, Stacy, tell us about a crazy business travel experience.
So there are like two like memorable trips that like pop into my head when thinking about this topic. And one of them I touched on a little briefly, I think, in a past podcast episode. I don't know how deep I got into it, but I want to get into that one again because it's like super funny, like I think. And I don't know that I got into like all the details of it, but I'm going to save that one for right now. And I'm going to do the shorter one like first. So now I've never been to a town as small as having Amish people and having that type of population. Now, the one job I had where I was traveling almost every week to different healthcare facilities, I felt like I would always get sent to some of the most remote places, that I got sent to small towns a lot. And growing up in South Florida, I grew up in Palm Beach County. If you send me to a small town, it's a bit of culture shock sending me, different places. Like one town I went to was about population 20,000, people out in the mountains in North Carolina. And the smallest town I ever went to was Monticello, Arkansas. And I believe back then the population was about 10,000 people. So you have to get online and make all your own travel arrangements. And I get on there and I'm looking for places to stay. These were the options that were in this town. You could stay at a Days Inn, a Holiday Inn Express, or a local bed and breakfast. And those were the three options. And being the hotel snob that I am, I'm like, Days Inn is a definite hell no, not going to happen. I can remember doing like family vacations as a kid and staying at a Days Inn. They're not that fancy, not happening. Back in the 80s, the Days Inn. And then Holiday Inn Express, I just was never a fan of like those, the few that I had stayed in. So I'm like, let me just take a shot on the bed and breakfast. Now, interestingly, the bed and breakfast was like $60-something a night as well, which is like crazy. It's like crazy cheap. So I decided to book at the bed and breakfast. So I fly from Palm Beach into Little Rock, and then I had to drive, I don't know, it's probably like at least an hour and a half from Little Rock to this small town. And I pull up to this bed and breakfast and I'm like, oh no. I just like see this house and I'm like, oh no, it was someone's house converted into a bed and breakfast. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. So I like put the car in reverse. I go over to the Holiday Inn Express and thinking, I'm just going to cancel the B&B and I'm going to do the Holiday Inn Express. Well, the Holiday Inn Express was booked. It was not happening. There was like no availability. So the only availability was my reservation at the B&B. So I went back and I parked the car and I take my stuff and I walk in. And it's odd because you feel like you're in a stranger's home, because that's what it is. It's a home where the rooms are kind of self-contained and that you have your own bathroom in the room. Thank God there was no bathroom sharing in this place. I would have completely freaked out. But each one has its own sink and its shower and all that. But anyway, so I check in. It was kind of funny that she's going through the process and what's available. And she's like, give me your breakfast order, whatever you want tomorrow morning. We cook it for you. Just let us know. We'll take care of it. So you get the homemade breakfast, thing. And then you go down and you eat breakfast in the morning. And then she's like, this is the room you're going to be in. So she's explaining to me, if you go to the front room, if you open the closet door, there's an elevator there for you to like go up or that goes up to the second floor. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking she's walking me to an elevator for me. So when we walk to the front and I open up this closet door, it's like this dumbwaiter kind of setup thing. And I'm like, I'm not getting in that. And she's like, dear, it's not for you. It's for your luggage. To send it upstairs, you push the button and it goes upstairs. So I felt like a complete moron, like over that, thinking she's wanting me to go up on this and she's going to push the button and send me up. So she explains, when you get upstairs to your room, open your closet door and your luggage will be there waiting for you. Ah, okay. So that was kind of interesting. So then I get up to the room and it kind of reminded me, like that board game Clue that we played when we were kids. Or if you saw the movie Clue, or like you watch those movies that have like the haunted like mansions, like the decor like in there, it was a little bit brighter than that, but like the pictures on the wall were kind of like sketches of people and different things. And it was a little dark for me coming from like South Florida. And I'm like, okay, this room has like an interesting vibe. And so I'm trying to get acclimated to being, again, you feel like you're in a stranger's home. This is somebody's bedroom you're technically in. And then my coworker who was meeting me, he also flown into Little Rock from San Diego. So he's a big city person, and just driving there, he's like, Stacy, oh my goodness. He's like, where am I going? Like, where are they sending us? Like, he's already having a little bit of a panic attack, like seeing like where he's going to, like on the drive. And then I'm like, yeah, this town is really small. And I'm like, I'm in this B&B and I'm like, I'm not really a fan. I tried to go over to the Holiday Inn Express, but they're booked. And he's like, well, I'm staying at the Holiday Inn Express. So we had plans to meet up and then go over to the client site briefly that afternoon for an introductory meeting before we started training the next day. And so I went to pick him up, and then we went to meet with the client. Now, he had a funny story where when he went to check into his room at the Holiday Express, they gave him a key to a room that already had somebody in it. So he walked in on somebody like in the room. So that was super funny. We had a good laugh over that. And then, so we go to the client site and we're asking them, like, where should we go for dinner? Because you're in this small town and the only chain places that you see are like the fast food places. Like they have a McDonald's, stuff like that. But you don't know any of the restaurants because they don't have like what we would have in Palm Beach or out in San Diego. And they said, oh, you have to go to the country club for dinner. The food there is like really good. And I'm like, country club? Seriously? I'm like, okay. I'm like, tell us how to get to the country club. So they tell us where to go. And we pull onto this like winding gravel road. And so this is going into their country club. And then you kind of come to the end of it and it looks like kind of like, I don't know, a warehouse sort of like at the end of this road. It doesn't really look like anything fancy, or maybe like a building you might see like at a park or something, I guess maybe would be more accurate. And so we get out of the car and we walk in and it's like folding chairs and folding tables and just a very simple setup. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, a sports bar at home is like, way fancy compared to this. And so it was just very different for us to, see something like that this is their fancy spot to like go to dinner. And it's kind of like you would set up, for like a quick picnic or something. That's kind of what it reminded me of, like an indoor picnic. But the food was great. The people were amazing, like the friendliest people. So the next day we go to the client site and we're like, oh, thanks for the recommendation. And we were just talking in general about small towns and how they're different and we're not used to it. And somebody was telling a story that like they had like this scandal like not too long ago that apparently somebody had been going into homes and stealing panties like out of women's like, dressers, because people don't lock doors in small towns. They don't think to. So that was pretty scandalous there, which is pretty funny. And then I remember when we were there, they were delivering the new telephone books to, the people. Their telephone book, I'm not kidding you, was probably about as big as this notepad, okay, for all of their people that live there. And I said, oh my gosh, can I take that home for a souvenir? I have to see that. Back in the phone book days, I'm like aging myself when they still printed them. But sweetest people, like nicest people that you could like ever meet. So it was a great trip that way. But we were like out in the sticks, like seriously out in the sticks with like nothing that we were accustomed to. And then the other trip was when I went to Atlanta, where I had to do training when Emory was a client of mine back in 2010. And this is the one I touched on before. And you guys will remember the story when I start telling it, because Tony, you really like this story. So this was a trip that was scheduled for February going to Atlanta. And there was the possibility of snow falling in Atlanta before I went. I saw the weather report and my contact was like, Stacy, they always say it's going to snow in Atlanta. It never does. You don't need to worry about that happening. Well, of course, the one time I'm in Atlanta, actually I've been in Atlanta in February before. It's cold as hell, in February in Atlanta. It's freezing, but it had never snowed. In this particular trip, it actually started snowing. And I had brought 9 other people with me to the site to be trained for a project that we were going to work. And they were coming in from all over parts of the country. And 3 of us came in together from Palm Beach. And there was a lot of funny little stories along the way that I won't get into with people traveling to Atlanta and the whole MARTA experience. If anybody's been to Atlanta, you know all about MARTA, and that can be entertaining in and of itself with the people that you can come across on MARTA. But we were in training the one day. We flown in on an evening. We're supposed to train the next day and come home the next evening, 24-hour turnaround time. Well, when we were in training, it started snowing. Remember, my person, it's not going to snow. It started snowing. And then as soon as it started snowing, Delta starts canceling flights left and right. Atlanta's their hub. And I happened to look at my phone and I'm like, all of our flights have been canceled tonight. We're like not going anywhere. And they had rebooked everybody out Monday morning. This is a Friday and they've now rebooked us for Monday. And I'm like, that can't happen. We all can't be stuck here in Atlanta. So that was kind of an issue in trying to like get home and trying to find flights and then get a rental car, trying to do that to drive home. And then they shut down cars leaving the state because too many people wanted to rent cars and take them elsewhere. And so we had a heck of a time like getting like out just in general. So Interestingly, the one and only time I ever got snowed in and couldn't leave because of snow was freaking Atlanta, of like all places. I never had that happen with any of my travel in the Northeast. I used to book 2 flights sometimes when I travel in the Northeast to get out of Dodge, so I could pick which one if I had to like beat the weather or like get ahead of it. Like I would always do that. But the funny thing about the training at Emory was when I told her, you're gonna remember this about the boot, the sole coming off my boot. Remember, it was cold, so I wore my boots to Atlanta, and when I went to meet my client, the sole had cracked in half on the bottom of my boot. So I walk in to meet my client for the first time with the sole clomp, 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 flopping around on the bottom of my boot, which was so embarrassing. And we get in the training room, and one of the girls is like, I have shoe glue at my desk. Let me bring you my shoe glue to help fix your boot. So she brings it in. This stuff smells as bad as anything can smell. It's filling the training room with this horrible odor. And then I'm trying to put the boot back together and it's not working. And then I had to pick up the table, the heavy table, and set it down on the boot to smash it, to hold it together and leave it there all day. So I'm walking around with like one boot on my foot while I'm trying to glue together the sole like on the other one, which is kind of ridiculous. And then, so that I was dealing with that before I found out about the canceled flights. Now I got to deal with the canceled flight situation and figure out how the heck we all get home, and get things done and book other nights in the hotel and all that. Our stay's going to be prolonged. And then by the end of the day, everything shut down in Atlanta. I mean, it was like maybe 2 inches of snow and the whole city shuts down because they don't know what to do with that. So we were walking back to the hotel at the end of the day, and we now have snow covering the ground, can't see the grass. And I start walking across the snow. I'm taking the shortcut, and then my boot falls apart again. So now I have a boot without a sole out here in the snow, and I'm so aggravated, and everybody else had taken a different path than me. So what happens is I'm so mad about the sole on this boot. I'm so frustrated. I'm over it. I rip the sole off of this boot and I just fling it down into the snow. And I just like keep walking through the snow. And so my foot is exposed in the snow. I'm walking back to the hotel like this. It is what it is. And the girls that were with me, they are laughing so hard because they see me throw the sole, and I'm just like swearing and carrying on because I've had enough of the day between the boot and the flight cancellations and all of that. So yeah, that was just, like I said, of all the places to get snowed in, I never anticipated it was going to be Atlanta. We did get home the next day. We did get on a flight by a miracle of God. We ended up getting on a flight the next day. But yeah, that was quite the adventure. We had a lot of fun in 24 hours. I can say it's fun now. When you're dealing with it, it's not fun, but looking back on it, it actually was a fun trip, all things considered. And we had some great funny memories like after that trip. So those are the two that are probably the most memorable to me.
So I have to ask, when you were on the back roads going to not Airbnb, I guess, because just bed and breakfast at the time, was this in the era of having phone navigation, or were you there like with your printed out MapQuest directions?
Hey, I was going to talk about that. That was a real struggle back in the day.
Yeah,
because if you missed it,
MapQuest would only get you so far, and then you were like on your own, like towards the end of the directions. Like it would drop you here, but you somehow had to figure out how to get over there because it did not have the precision that we have now. I wish when I was traveling a lot, I would have had GPS on a phone. This was pre-GPS. Let's see, when did I have? That was maybe that was probably 4 years before the first iPhone came out. That I was doing all that travel, but that would have been like really nice. So yeah, the MapQuest thing. But think about that before MapQuest. Like you didn't have like anything. Like I think Tony and I were joking about this recently. I go, you go to the gas station and buy the paper map and try to figure out like where you were going on this paper
even
map.
Read those things.
How did people get anywhere like back then? How did that even work?
We were just talking about this literally, and I was going to talk about this. I mean, when I first started traveling, this was before GPS was like really mainstream. Like you had to be like really rich to have something like that. And it wasn't accurate. It wasn't like mainstream like it is now. So you'd print out your MapQuest directions and then like hope and pray that when you went back, it was like all the same like turns, and like you were just like stressing out. I remember so many times like pulling over at some random gas station and just like crying and falling apart and be like, can you help me? And then they would tell you how to leave and you'd be so upset that you couldn't even remember what they said. Thank God for GPS.
That is one of the best modern inventions, GPS, I swear.
Oh my
I
God.
mean, that, I don't know how the heck that and caller ID, those are the two best modern inventions, I think. We used to have to answer the phone not knowing who was on the other end. Oh my God. Can you imagine?
But yeah, I'm right there with you, Tony. Like if I had my GPS my MapQuest directions and I missed like one stop, that was it. Then I was pulling over, hysterics, everything was going on. I had no clue where I was. And like I have terrible direction. I will set my GPS for the same place like 8 to 10 times before I remember how to get there.
Oh, yeah, the struggle is real. In Florida, because they keep changing all the interstates and the roads, like it's horrible because you don't know where to go because the GPS can't keep up with all the changes. And so then you're like taking a 25-minute detour when that was like totally not necessary.
The other thing that's nice about GPS is you know that there's traffic before you head somewhere, which is a beautiful thing. Before, you just got stuck in traffic. You didn't know you were about to hit traffic. It was too late. You were in it and you had nowhere to go. Now you can find an alternative. I mean, Tony. I was just in Orlando and I saw Tony when I was in Orlando. And that one afternoon, Tony's like, "Oh, it's Saturday. There won't be a lot of traffic, Stacey. It'll be fine." Yeah, okay, Tony. I knew better. And it took Tony probably over an hour to get to me. It took me 45 minutes to get somewhere that should have been more like 25, like maximum. It was insane. But it was still the fastest route to get there. And GPS showed me the others and I was still on the fastest route. But it's nice to have those options. And yeah, before, if you got stuck in, a big accident, you were just stuck and you didn't know where to go. You didn't know the alternative route. That's the beautiful thing when you get stuck in traffic. Now you can look for somewhere. You don't have to sit in traffic for 2 hours at a standstill, assuming you can move, if you can get through it.
Yeah, and let's not even talk about before we had cell phones. Like, how did we communicate? Like, how did we communicate when we were going to get there, if we were going to be late? Like, there were payphones, right? Like, you do the payphone thing, which they don't really even exist now. But I can remember, kind of early on when I would travel in my career, like, this was before you had data on your phone. This was before, like, you, like, this was before you could like get good service depending on where you're at because there weren't so many towers. And so like this is also when your battery would like die after you use your phone for like an hour. And so then you're stressed out because there's no car charger. And it was like so different back then.
I remember when I took my CPC exam, I took it in Hershey, Pennsylvania, because that was the closest chapter that I had, I think, at the time. And Hershey's not super close to me. It's maybe an hour and a half. And this was back when we had those little Garmin GPS systems that you would have to like suction cup onto your car. And it kept going in and out. So I'd be like driving down these roads onto Hershey and all of a sudden I had no GPS anymore. And I'm like having this heart attack, like, please God, at some point pick back up. Please God, at some point the signal has to pick back up.
I've been to the Hershey Hotel. I spoke at a conference at the Hershey Hotel one time many years ago. So I can say I'd completely forgotten about that until you mentioned Hershey, Pennsylvania. I was only there for like 24 hours, but it was cool to like go there and see it. It's a really cool property.
It's nice.
Yeah. So when you guys were talking about your stories, it reminded me of a couple of stories. So I used to do a lot of travel, I mentioned, to rural areas kind of all across the country. And I remember this one particular place that I had to go to, and it was like in BFE, and it was like, I would describe it as like cow town hell. Like you literally could smell the cows from like 50 miles coming in. And then when I got to my hotel, it was just like this stench that would not go away. Like, I kid you not, after I left, like it was like in my clothes, like the smell. And it was unbearable. Like you could hardly breathe. And it was just like you had to deal with it. And I was there for like several days. And so that was just horrible. And then I remember this one particular place, I think I talked about this before, but in rural health, especially, they rely on their coders like really heavily because they have, critical access hospitals and all of these rules and things that they have to meet for their funding. So this one particular hospital had lost their coder. She retired. She had been their coder for like 30 years. And so they were completely screwed because they didn't have anybody to replace her. And there wasn't like people that wanted to live in this specific part of town. And they were still on paper. This was back when paper was like, kind of still the norm, and people that were electronic were the exception. And so I remember going out there regularly to basically stay for the week to help them get caught up. I'd go out for like a week, a month, and that happened for a long time. And when I first got there, I thought that I was in the wrong place because it was a hospital. And so I'm thinking, yeah, there's like this big hospital, and it was like a 3-room hospital. Like there was like 3 rooms, like there wasn't an OR. Like it was just like this very strange looking place that like looked like it was something out of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like it was so creepy. And when I walked in, everybody could tell that I wasn't from there because like they had more employees than like Kaiser Permanente. Like these people, like they had somebody that would like come and like take out the trash. And then they had people that would like come around and dust the desks. And then they have people that would like come and hand deliver like these courier packages. And so the hospital was like the main employer of the town. And so it was just like really awkward because there were all these people doing all these jobs that like, like they're not even like, real jobs. And so I would have to come in and talk about, okay, your budget is this, but yet you're paying all these people to do these jobs. And so like that was not well received because it was a political thing. And so I had to like really, kind of watch what I said. But it was such a creepy place. Like there was one bathroom, like for the whole hospital, there was one bathroom. And like the morgue was like in a very specific place that wasn't that far away from everything else. And so it was like, it was so creepy. And when the employees, like some of them were super, super nice. And, I got to know them and became friendly with them. And so I would ask them like, what do you guys do like after work? Because this place is in the middle of nowhere. There's no restaurants. There's like one hotel. It's a motel, some like, off the wall place. And the Loaf and Jug was, that was the only place, Victoria, you said that like that was where you got lunch and dinner if you didn't make it at home. And so I was like, what do you guys do for fun? And they were just like, oh yeah, we get together and hang out and just drink in the backyard and, like chicken fights and like where they, take the chickens and like make them fight and just like crazy stuff. And so one particular day, the ladies were like, oh my gosh, you're in town. This is a really big deal. We're having a donkey basketball tournament. We'd love for you to come. And so I was like, what the hell? Like, donkey basketball. So I was like, all right, sure, whatever. So I go and it's like, the school, because there's only one school and all the people go to the same school, like from kindergarten until 12th grade. And there's like the schoolhouse. And so we go in the gym and there's these freaking donkeys, like just walking around, like taking a shit, like right on the floor. Like, and so I'm like, okay, like this really stinks. But like, what are they going to do with these donkeys? And so like, I kid you not, they get on the donkeys and start playing freaking basketball, like, and keeping score. Like it's a competitive game. So yeah, that was donkey basketball. And I was just like, you guys are strange. Like this is
I would actually pay money to watch donkey basketball. That sounds like very entertaining. Like seriously, I want to see that. I want to see that.
It was very interesting. So that was, like a form of entertainment for them. So when in Rome, do as the Romans, right? Like, so, I was entertained to say the least, but I had never seen no shit like that in my life. That's for sure. There was another instance where I had to go do a pretty intensive training with a rural health clinic. And so I had to fly to their site, and it was like a 5 hour, it would have been like a 5 hour drive or like a 1 hour flight. And so at the time, I really needed to be efficient with my travel because I had a lot going on in my schedule. So when I get to the airport, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to check in for my flight. And they're like, oh, okay, let's, we're actually going to take you to this different section of the airport. And so I was like, okay, cool. So they take me, and it's like this private charter lounge. So it's like where they, the people that have private planes go to leave and take off. And so it was really different. Like, you didn't go through security, like they didn't check your stuff. You didn't like, it wasn't like TSA. It was just like, okay, here's your ID. Okay, you're flying. So I get on the plane, and it's like, you think it's, you think it's this private plane, and you're like, oh yeah, like I really made it big. Like I'm traveling on a private jet. And then it's like this teeny tiny plane where the pilot is right in the front. Like, there's no safety, there's no gate, there's no bathroom. And it's like the scariest hour of your life, because you're just like, boom, 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 because there's no, like, it's not a big plane. And so like you can feel every inch of turbulence. And it was like, I thought I was going to die. So when we finally landed, I'm like, thank God, like I made it. I'm alive. Like, holy shit, I have to get on this plane and go back home today. Like, I don't really want to do that. Maybe I'm just going to rent a car and drive home, because like, I don't want to get back on this plane. And so we land, and it's like, this place looked like it was like Flint, Michigan. Like, it was awful. Like, all the houses were like, boarded up, and it was just really bad. There didn't look like there were like normal people living in this place. And so they take me to the clinic, and the clinic is right across from the jail. And the jail, I guess, shares the clinic. So they send all the inmates to the clinic, because they don't have like a nurse for the jail. And so I'm at the clinic, and I'm like, okay, let's sit down, do our thing. And we're talking, and all of a sudden there's all these alarms that go off, and I'm like, what's going on? And so they locked the facility down because somebody had escaped from the jail. So I was stuck there for like 6 hours, not knowing when we were going to be able to leave, because they locked the entire place down because there was somebody had escaped. And so I'm like, God, I think I'm going to die here. Like, I'm never going to get to leave, because this is just like, it's horrible. So yeah, that was pretty traumatic.
So your story reminded me of a story, and I cannot believe I didn't think of this story in the initial set. So I'm gonna share this, and I will keep this brief. I won't go into every detail of the story, but I had to travel to Bluefield, Virginia one time, which is right on the border of West Virginia and Virginia. Like, part of it's in West Virginia, part of it's in Virginia, and the only commercial airline that flies into Bluefield back at that time was U.S. Air. After you land in DC, you have to get on one of these smaller commuter planes. It was the small plane story that you told. So you go up these small, you're like not on a jetway anymore. You walk out on the tarmac there, and you got the tiny set of stairs, and you go up the tiny set of stairs, and I get into the plane, and you can't even stand up straight. The plane is so short. You have to hunch over to get in it, and it's only about this wide. And I go, oh my God, this is so small. Like, I have a total panic attack because I'm very claustrophobic, and this thing is like so freaking tiny. And so I had to kind of calm myself down, be like, okay, Stacy, it's not going to be that long. It's going to be a short flight to your location. So you sit down on the flight, and then you realize they're going to have to make a stop before they take you. So you're going to a small county airport to pick up and drop off before they take you to your small county airport. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I had to go through 2 takeoff and landings in this thing. And this was pre 9/11, before they had to put doors and protect cockpits. So I'm sitting in the seat, and you can see all the controls and all the bells and whistles in the cockpit while they're flying the plane, going off and doing things. And we're flying through the mountains. I am freaking out. Well, then it gets dark quickly, so you can't see the mountains anymore, which is a good thing. But then I hear what sounds like rocks hitting the plane, like somebody's outside throwing rocks at it. And that's making me a little nervous, because I'm in this small plane. Then we land at this first county airport, and then they say, oh, we have to take a few moments and de-ice the plane. It will be a little while. I'm like, oh my God, you're flying through ice. I'm like, what the heck is going on? I'm like, I'm going to die here, So that freaked me out. Then they de-ice the plane, and then we go to our final destination, where I finally get to get off this tiny little tube that I've been sitting in for much longer than I anticipated. And when I'm coming down the stairs to get off the plane, I'm from Florida. I don't know what black ice is. I slipped and fell on black ice as soon as I came off of the stairs. My feet went out from underneath me. I start to go backwards towards the ground. Thank God my bag landed underneath my head, or I probably would have died like at that moment, because I fell straight backwards, and could have cracked my head open, and died right there on the tarmac in Bluefield, West Virginia, which wouldn't have been pleasant. I got away with a bruise, thank goodness. Of course, the pilots are like, "Are you okay?" They're running over to make sure I'm okay. And I got to jump up, like, oh, because I'm embarrassed. No, I'm good. I'm good. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die. My leg hurts so bad. So there was like that, getting there. And then going back, like you talked about, like the airport staffing, like going back to this airport in the day now, the guy, you go check in at the luggage counter, you check your bag, and the guy gives you your boarding pass and all that. This same guy who's doing that and giving you your boarding pass, he's the same guy that is doing the gate announcement. He's like getting on the intercom when there are 3 of us, like 5 feet away from him, to like do the flight announcement. Then he's the one that loads the luggage on the plane. He's the one guiding the plane in to like park it. Like he's like the one-man show. I'm like, where the heck am I? I'm like, this is so crazy. I'm like, is he going to get in there and fly? I'm like, obviously somebody different flies. That's it. The pilot flies the plane, but this dude does everything else. So that was quite the small. So your story made me think of that, being on that tiny plane and me having a complete panic attack about during that whole experience.
That happened to me too. I was just like so panicked. I had to like get myself together. And then to think that I had to get back on this plane and go back home, I was just like, oh my God, like I need a Xanax. I need something, because this is bad. It was so scary. So yeah, private planes are not all that they're cracked up to be.
Yeah, that's not something I've had the experience of yet. Most of the planes that I've been on have been large commercial planes, not these tiny things.
Yeah, good times. I do a lot less travel now. I will be traveling business or first class.
Yeah, so now you're gonna miss out though on donkey basketballs though.
Donkey basketball. I mean, they were like really into this. Like, I wonder if they're gonna see this and think that I'm, talking badly about them. I love you guys. We had, fun, but it was definitely a story I'll never forget.
Oh my gosh.
So
Yeah, I don't think
fun.
I grew up in a pretty suburban area, and we have a lot of farmland, but I don't think donkey basketball would have been on there. I did have once when I was a kid, and I didn't realize how weird this was until I said it to my boyfriend as an adult, that when I was a kid, we used to have goldfish swims where we would take the public swimming pool and fill it all up with goldfish and let all the kids jump in and chase after them. And we would I don't remember if we had nets or bags or whatever, but we would fill up the chlorinated swimming pool with goldfish, and then we'd all jump in and get them and go home with our little baggies of our goldfish.
Funny. Like, how did they not deteriorate in the water?
Because we caught them really, really quick.
I was going to say, you must have caught them in record time if they were still alive.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
But yeah, so I don't have a lot of great airplane travel stories though. I've only airplane traveled for business maybe twice, I think, and a couple of more coming up, because I've basically gone for health con. I do remember my very first health con though was in Las Vegas, and it was maybe 2015 or so. And I was too scared to even go outside my hotel room, because I was there. I was all alone. I wasn't popular at that time. I didn't know anyone in the industry. I knew of people in the industry. So there may have been a couple of people I introduced myself to, but I was there to speak. And I did that. And I just kind of looked down the strip and then crawled back into my hotel room. So it was a pretty uneventful trip. When I went to Orlando in 2018 for HealthCon, that was the trip that I fell in love with Disney. And I did almost make myself, I don't know if I want to say sick or what, but I had bariatric surgery back in 2013. And one of the side effects of bariatric surgery is because you become a very lightweight drinker, because you basically bypass all of the stuff that digests your alcohol usually, and it goes really quickly into your bloodstream. So I went to Epcot the day before I was speaking and had like one drink, and I was like almost on the floor of Epcot. I felt so awful afterwards that I'm like, oh my God. And that was like all it did for me was just that one freaking drink in Epcot. But I did have an instance once. When I was working in Lancaster. It was I was driving a fairly new car. I have this little blue Kia Soul that I drive, and I had just gotten it a couple of months prior because my prior Kia Soul got totaled. I was driving home from work. I had an hour commute back and forth. I was just about home, and I had to stop because there was traffic. Someone was turning into a store, and I was like the third car behind in this line of traffic, and there was a bicyclist going by on the side of the street, and I guess the guy flying up behind me was paying attention to this person on the bicycle and not the fact that there was parked traffic there because someone was turning, and just nailed right into the back of me at 50 miles an hour because they were watching the bicyclist, they said. So I was driving to work in my, new car because my previous one was totaled because someone rammed into the back of me on my daughter's 5th birthday, with the cake in tow, while I was getting ready to take her to Chuck E. Cheese, of course. And I was driving to work. I was getting ready. Novitas at the time was doing their Accuracy Matters seminars. So Amy Asher from Novitas had reached out and they're like, hey, Victoria, we know you have connections. Can you hook up and put out one of these Accuracy Matters conferences? Can you find a space? Can you help us promote? Is it okay? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I can help you do that. So I was able to rent some, or I guess book some space from our healthcare facility and set up for Accuracy Matters. So we were having not only a lot of people coming in from our healthcare organization, but other healthcare organizations. I got approved to budget for, providing snacks and food and, make sure that everyone, from the local chapters was coming if they wanted to come and see for the Accuracy Matters education, because everyone loves to come and get the free education from Novitas and stuff. It's always so good to hear it from the horse's mouth. And I guess I should clarify, Novitas is our Medicare fiscal intermediary for our area. So they interpret all of Medicare's guidelines. And so I'm like driving to work. I had just gotten my car and I'm ready. I'm all amped up to go and set up for this big seminar. All these people are coming. We got the snacks coming. I got to make sure that, the people at the front desk know that we have outsiders coming so that they can clear them through security and let them through, and make sure that, the food's set up and, everyone's ready to go. And I'm literally like just about at work, like at the road that I need to turn to get into the complex. And someone just bam, rear ends me from behind. And I was so upset because I'm like, I can't be late. I can't deal with this right now. Medicare is coming and I have to set up everything for this freaking conference. Thankfully, I get out and the guy can tell like I'm pissed. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And when I saw like how apologetic he was, I calmed down and I'm like, I just got this car. My last one was rear-ended like 2 months ago. I have to set up for this seminar. So we evaluated everything and it looked like the only thing that had come off of the back of my car was like, there's this little disc or something. It still popped out of the back of my car. I don't know what the hell it's even for. It's literally just dangling there on a wire. It does nothing. I have no idea. I have no idea what the hell it was even for, why it popped out, or why I haven't even glued it back on, to be honest with you. Everything seems structurally okay. We quickly exchanged numbers and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. This is going to seem weird, but I actually work in the same building. So it's going to look like I'm kind of following you in, but I'm going to work at one of the other places. So I calmed myself down. I had to rush in, make sure all of the, muffins were set up. I had to quickly get a long extension cord because the projector that they had or something wouldn't reach. And I had to borrow and barter to get this long extension cord from the project manager. And she actually, I think, wound up holding a vendetta against me because she was pissed off because she's like, you have to bring this back. And it got lost like right afterwards. I have no idea where the heck it got to. If someone thought it was part of something else and just collected it, it just turned up nowhere. And I was happy about it because I got in and Amy from Medicare was like, oh, look at Victoria. She always looks so wonderfully put together, and she's just so fancy and wonderful to be here. And she just looks so amazing. Look at how, just pristinely she's put together. And I hadn't put on anything great. It was like a cute little t-shirt dress with a little jacket and leggings and boots. But, thankfully, everything went okay then with the education session. Aside from the fact that, like I said, that practice manager, and I think I later on got forwarded an email where she was like making that, how some people will forward you like a huge 10-page chain letter. And like on page 10 of it, there was like the project manager had made some kind of like nasty comment about me on it. And I'm like, oh, I guess she's still pissed off about the freaking extension cord or something. But yeah, there was that. And I did a lot of traveling too with my employees. So I started out at that job as a senior coder. And then I think it was kind of known that eventually they were hoping to get me into like a supervisor role. And I would travel a lot with the auditors, educators, just kind of go out and see what they were doing, how they held their provider education sessions, give some kind of feedback, which was extremely stressful for them because they didn't get like super formalized training. Some of them, like they were just kind of taking it by ear. A lot of them didn't know how to present an audit. Like some of them, I would go in and see them, and they were literally like, okay, so case 2 you got wrong because you were 1 level off. Do you have any questions on that? No. Okay. Case 6, yeah, that one was another level off. Do you have any question? No. Okay. Okay, I'm done here. You can sign off. I like that was their they didn't know how to have provider conversations. So one of the employees was taking me to a provider education session that they were doing based off of their audit results. And we were just kind of chit-chatting, and they got so involved and nervous in regards to the conversation that they didn't notice that there was a red light and started going through the intersection. And we came about that close to getting into a very bad accident while she was driving me to one of the provider practices to go over audit results. So yeah, I'm glad to not have to be even car traveling as much anymore these days to all these provider locations all over the place.
Oh, that reminds me so much of, my days where I'd have to like live out of my car because, you've got like 15 meetings with doctors and you got to put all their audit results. And this is back when you do everything on paper.
Here's a pre-HIPAA thing. When I had my first medical records job, do you know that I would physically put medical records in my vehicle, drive them to the physician's offices to get them to complete their records and wait for them to do that, and then drive them back in my car with paper records? I'm like, my boss was a huge proponent of this. I'm like, that probably never should have been happening. That was before I knew all the rules governing the profession, but that's what I would do. I'd get in my car, use my own gas and my own car to go get records completed with physicians with no compensation whatsoever. And what if the records flew out the window? That probably wasn't the most secure way of accomplishing that mission. But that was back in 1992. It was a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. They probably didn't even have locked bags back in 1992 for that kind of stuff. Like now you have a little lock and key and you zip them all up and you stick all the records in and put the key on your keychain because I guess no one else could possibly think of taking the key off of your keychain and opening it up.
Yeah, some of the stuff is like so practical, right? Like makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been a lot of fun. So to wrap up, let's share best tips for business travel.
Oh,
So,
I have.
Go ahead.
So this is my number one tip, especially for women in the era that we are at right now. One thing that I've recognized, and I will always do this, is I bought myself a cheap burner phone to take as a backup whenever I travel, because I recognized that if I'm out somewhere and I lose my cell phone, I drop it, my battery goes out, anything like that, I can't order an Uber. I can't have GPS to know where the heck I am. So I always have a cheap backup phone, like a track phone or something that I take with me in case my primary phone goes down, because I am completely useless without it.
That's interesting. That's something I would never think of, but you're right. we talked about all the benefits that our phone gives us when we travel. Like, even, isn't it great wherever you're traveling, you're like, I need Starbucks and I need it now. You go to your phone and it shows you all the Starbucks and where you can go. We never had that, before. So that's kind of cool. So I'm going to tie in my tip with Stacy's shoe and tell. This is going to be like a twofer like here. Okay. So the shoes that I'm going to show off like here are, I bought 2 pairs of Steve Maddens like a few weeks ago. So I have a pair like in the pink bling, the platform shoes, and then I had to buy them like in the white too. And people are like, Stacey, why do you need to get 2 pairs of shoes? They're like the same, there's different colors. Well, when you walk into the Steve Madden store and they are half price and you can get 2 pairs of Steve Maddens for $60, you buy them because you don't find Steve Madden shoes for $30 a pair. So that's my bargain. So how does that tie in with my tip? I personally like to only travel places that I can drive, so I can transport all of my shoes. Like when I went to FHIMA, I drove there. I took about 18 or 19 pairs of shoes with me. And so that's why I like to keep it local. I don't want to fly because I can't bring, a good portion of my shoe collection. So that's my tip. Keep it close to home so you can travel with your shoes.
Oh, that's so predictable. Yeah. So my best tip, I've got 2. So number 1 would be don't stay at Airbnbs.
I'm always afraid people are going to take a camera in an Airbnb and record me. Like, that's my thing. Like, they're going to put all cameras in their house and mics in their house and spy on me. No, thank you.
That's exactly. So you don't want to do that. Trust me. I haven't personally stayed at Airbnbs for business travel, but I have a lot of friends that have, and they have really creepy, scary stories where people are watching them, or the doors just automatically open, and so you don't know who's coming in and out of the house and what's going on. So I would say stay at a hotel, because an Airbnb, unless you just like that and that's your thing and you're whatever, but I don't personally recommend it.
Yeah, I hear they're kind of falling out of popularity these days because a lot of them are giving these ridiculous cleaning lists and things that they're like, before you leave, you have to clean all of the dishes, you have to wipe down the counters, you have to scrub the toilet, and we're still going to charge you a cleaning fee, and you can't have anyone over, and you have to be in bed by 8 o'clock. I've heard that there's just too many restrictions now with the Airbnbs that they're kind of falling out of popularity.
Yeah, and I think from a safety perspective, especially as a woman, you have to think about things a little bit differently. So don't stay at Airbnbs. And just to add to that, I personally don't stay at hotels that lock from the outside. So they're not an inside hotel where your door is you go inside of the building and then you go to your hotel room. I don't stay at hotels that lock from the outside because you want to get murdered, that's the quickest way to do it. Those are always the hotels that are, on those horror movies. So, that's really important. Don't stay somewhere that you're not safe. And if you're not safe, then you need to speak up. Because I've been in situations where, I'm going on behalf of my employer. And so you feel if I say something, then, I might get in trouble. And it's about your safety. You need to advocate for yourself if you're not feeling safe. That's really important. The second thing is, the second tip is pack for all occasions, all weather. So I had to speak at a conference in, I believe it was May, where I went to Montana and I spoke at the University of Montana, and it was May. So I'm thinking, yeah, I'm good. I'm just going to, wear regular clothes. It was the coldest, windiest, craziest weather that I've ever seen. I didn't have a real jacket, and I was in a really remote area. So I couldn't just go to Walmart and buy something because that just wasn't available. So I've also been in instances where I used to live in Colorado, during the summer, you think that everything's good, and you drive up to the mountains in your flip-flops, and then it's snowing 6 feet, and you don't have the appropriate clothes to wear. So pack for all different types of seasons. So like Stacy said, in Atlanta, she didn't have boots, or, she had this crazy shoe story. And, those things can be avoided if you pack appropriately, and everything works the way that it's supposed to, because sometimes your pants rip or your shoes break. And so you need to have a backup, because As I said earlier, I've been to some places where they don't have a Walmart, they don't have a place where you could just go pick something up. So just being prepared for that is really important.
In my defense, I packed appropriately and I had the appropriate shoe wear. I did not bring high heels to wear on that trip. The problem is, after my boot sole broke, I had nothing else to put on my feet because I did have, I think, an open pair of shoes that I wore there. So thankfully, one of my travel mates had an extra pair of sneakers that I could wear for 24 hours until I got home. Now I don't have a problem. I always have backup shoes.
Yeah. So this has been a lot of fun. I really want to thank everybody for tuning into our Coding Consultant Confessions podcast series. Don't forget to drop us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes or your favorite platform. Be sure to check us out every other Wednesday, and we'll see you at the next confession.
Thank you for tuning in to Coding Consultant Confessions with Tony Elholmes, Stacy Buck, and Victoria Mole. Unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic. Connect with the Coding Consultant Confessions podcast on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Simply search for Coding Consultant Confessions on any of these platforms to connect and engage with Tony, Stacy, and Victoria.